December 5th. Okay, then we will have it after 5th is Sunday or what? What is 5th?
Saturday.
Saturday. If 5th is Saturday, then we will have it on 6th. Sunday. We will close it on 6th of December. Is that fine? So tomorrow's timetable would be taken to the 6th of December and it will be completed on the 6th of December. And please take a note of this. Tomorrow we have no classes. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Right. Now let us start with Saint John. I have already introduced you to Saint John. Now, my dear students, please listen. Saint John is in which unit? Drama unit. Okay? And then if you, again, I'm sure you will all be taking down the notes. Please take down the notes and listen to me carefully. This Saint John was written by George Bernard Shaw. He is known for his drama of ideas. Okay, he is known for writing drama of ideas. So ideas, what are the ideas that he focuses upon? In this drama, Saint John, he discusses many ideas. Number one, feudalism. Okay, feudalism. What is feudalism? We all know it in Telugu. It is called Bhuswami. Bhuswami Rajyam. It means landlordship. Yeah? Landlordship. See, I do not know the political term for it, but I know it is called feudalism, where the small peasants, small farmers, they are the tenants. They work under the landlords. The landlords work under the bigger landlord, and the bigger landlord works under the feudal lords, and the feudal lords are under the king. So it is like a system, an economical, political system. Both economics and the politics, the system of economics and the politics, both of them work here. In India, even the caste system works in the feudal, complex feudal web. In India, during the earlier days, even the caste was a important aspect in the feudal system, which is why many of the low caste people who worked as laborers under the feudal system remained as laborers for a very, very long time, for generations together. So this is a kind of a system where the king and the landlords flourish, they prosper all the time, gaining on the returns that the tenants pay to them. Tenants are the small time farmers, and it is such a huge machine. Feudalism is such a huge political and economical machine that the small time farmers were all the time crushed under this huge machine. So feudalism is one of the ideas that our writer George Bernard Shaw is discussing. Next point is nationalism as an idea. So nationalism is that spirit of togetherness, spirit of unity, spirit of that national unity of oneness. During the independence struggle in India, we were all under a common bond. It was a common binding wine called nationalism. The song Vande Mataram, or the the strength that we all derived from our national leaders, and then freedom is my birthright. These are some of the terms, concepts to which we all, our people, our great grandparents during that time, they got glued to such ideas of Vande Mataram, Swaraj, and then Quit India movement, and such ideas unified the Indians as a single unit, the spirit of nationalism. In George Bernard Shaw's Saint John, we come across that kind of a spirit of nationalism, because at that point in 1420s, in the year 1420s, during the Middle Ages, medieval times, France was being colonized by the English. The English people have colonized the French people, and they have taken over major provinces of France. They have started establishing their feudal units in France, the English people. So the French people, they were all dismembered, and they were all divided between the French and the English. There was so much of confusion, turmoil. French people were getting killed under the heavy-handedness, high-handedness of the English, and the many feudal lords, they were happy because this system is promoting feudalism. This is French. This is only promoting feudalism. So who is enjoying this? The feudal lords are enjoying. And then people are suffering. So they want France to be liberated from England. So the spirit of nationalism was slowly gaining ground. Then other idea is Protestantism. Okay, Protestantism. Protestantism is, see, if I am not happy with the orthodox rules or conservative rules or conventional rules of any system, I protest, I question, I resist. So that becomes Protestantism. Okay, so it need not be confined only to the church. It can be, see, many of our own people have protested against caste hierarchy, against patriarchy. So many such kind of patterns are there in our own society in India. Okay, so if Jhansi Rani has protested, so she has come under that idea of Protestantism by resisting the English rule, number one. And she also went into the battlefield to fight against the English. So she was showing the patriarchal hegemony, that is, only men should be in the forefront, only men should take the decisions, only men should be called the heads of the states and heads of the families, and then all that kind. She resisted and protested by sitting on the throne, and also by raising the slogans of nationalism, and by protesting the English rule. So here, what is she showing? She is showing the sides of her feministic attitude, feminism. That is, she is questioning the authority of patriarchy. What is patriarchy? The domination of the man. Okay, domination of the male domination is patriarchy. In all the fields, there is male domination. So Jhansi Rani, what did she do? She attacked the patriarchal system by going into the battlefield by fighting. So she set herself as an example of woman power, woman empowerment. And by doing so, she also raised the spirit of nationalism and also questioned the authority of the English. So she became a Protestant, and she also protested the male hegemony, male authority, male domination. So she is a feminist. So Jhansi Rani can be seen as a feminist, she can be seen as a nationalist, she can be seen as a Protestant, okay, and she can also be seen as a figure of resistance against the male authority. So she is also questioning the patriarchal system. Through one gesture, she has exhibited these many dimensions of her personality. Okay, so when we are going to now Saint John can also be seen on the same lines. Joan, as a young girl, as a 17-year-old girl, she exhibited Protestantism, she exhibited nationalism, she exhibited feminism. Okay, and through her personality, we see that these ideas of feminism, Protestantism were very new during the Middle Ages. 1421, during that time, women were relegated to the margins of the society. Women were not allowed to take any decisions. Even today, in many cultures, women are pushed to the margins of the society. By doing so, they are not invited into the mainstream. The mainstream is the male. Okay? The secondary, that is second class citizen. A woman is a second class citizen. Man is a first class citizen. Because he is enjoying all the kinds of factors that are available within the society. But woman is a second class citizen. She cannot enjoy all the privileges. So education becomes a privilege. Working it becomes a privilege. So that is why woman is a second class citizen. But in the 1400s, she is not even considered as a citizen. At least now we can say she is a second class citizen. But in the 1400s, she was not even considered as a citizen. She was never discussed. She was never allowed into any kind of mainstream ideas. So you cannot even think of a woman entering politics. You cannot even think of a woman questioning the authority of the church. You cannot even think of a woman out of the domestic domains. She was confined only within the domesticity, the walls of domesticity. She was confined only. If she is going out only to work as a laborer or a farm hand in the agricultural fields. That's her roles. Her roles are very well defined. Out of these confines, you cannot come. You cannot question. You cannot talk. You are there in the kitchen, taking care of the children, cooking purposes and all. If you are coming out, you are working as a farmland, on the farmland as a helper, as a laborer. These are the two areas where you can work. Politics is not for you. Church is not for you. Any other main thing is not for you. So that was how women were treated in the 14th century. Okay, so this girl has questioned all these authorities. So it is very new for all the people. Like any young girl of that age, 17 years, questioning these authorities. Like she is asking the church, how can you do this? There was only one domination then, that was Catholic Church. So Catholic Church was the instrument between, or the vehicle or the agent between the material world and the heaven. So between the heaven, and that is the God, and the earth, there is an agent, and that agent is the church. Okay, that is the Catholic Church. So anybody who has to reach the God has to reach only through this vehicle, that is through the church. That was how Catholic Church was very firm with its ideas. And women were never allowed into the main practices of the church. And if anybody has to say anything, not all that has to happen only through the church. Even the king was under the church. If he has to take any major decisions, policies and all, only the church should give him permission. Only after which he can declare it open to the people. So church was playing an important role during the 14th, until the Protestant idea of Martin Luther. There is somebody very, very important in Christianity called Martin Luther. He protested against the Catholic Church. He said, no, God is for everyone. God can talk to everybody. Bible is for everyone. The word of God should be given into everybody's hands. So then the church got divided. First it was only Catholic. Then the church got divided into Catholic and Protestant. So whoever is who has got separated from the Catholic Church is called a Protestant. And then Protestant again is subdivided into different denominations. So that's about the church. But when Saint John was alive, there was no Protestant church. Only Catholic Church was there. But you can see Joan as questioning the authority of the church. So she is the first Protestant. She can be termed as the first Protestant of Catholic Church, not Martin Luther. So Joan has donned different roles by espousing different ideas. Okay, are you able to understand?
Yes, ma'am.
My dear friends, my dear students, is it difficult?
Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Yes.
No, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You are all able to follow it?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So can anyone tell me the different ideas that we discussed until now? One of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Feudalism. Yeah. Feudalism.
Nationalism. Nationalism.
Feminism. Okay. These are the major ideas that George Bernard Shaw was trying to try. So somebody asked a question. What is that? Somebody has asked me a question. Is this paper one? What is this? Is this paper one?
Paper 5.
Legendary gamer.
Paper 5. Lesson
Paper
number
5. Saint John.
Unit 3.
Yes, Unit 3. Wonderful. So this is paper 1 Kadu. This is paper 5. Okay. Then another idea is colonialism. Isn't it? Colonialism. So colonialism is authority, power. See, India was colonized by the whites.
England.
Yeah, European. Not just the English, but even the French, the Dutch. That is why I use the term European. So it was colonized. Colonized is, it was, it was taken over by them. The entire country was taken over by them. They made it into their colony. It is their colony. And we were colonized. It means they were exerting their power, authority, domination over us. So he is the colonizer. We are the colonized. Okay, we are the colonized. Indians are the colonized people. So India is a colony Today it is an ex-colony, but India is a colony. And who is the colonizer? The white man. White man is the European. Okay, so we can see this strains of colonialism. Colonialism is you are exerting your authority, your power, your domination over somebody else. That is colonialism. So English were colonizing the French. So the idea of colonialism was also focused upon by George Bernard Shaw. So how many ideas? Colonialism, feminism, nationalism, feudalism, Protestantism. 5 ideas can be seen in this text. Saint John. Okay, let us see how. So that is why this drama, John, can be termed as a drama of ideas. Next thing is, we will now go to the Middle Ages, where the life was very difficult. For everyone it was difficult. We think that our lives today are so difficult. But life for anybody, okay, was very difficult during the Middle Ages, because the law, the political law, the culture, the religious laws were very stringent, very strict, very firm. Anybody, as we have already understood, that the church was very, it was a supreme authority. Church was the supreme authority. Even the king had to answer the church. Understood? Okay? So who was the highest authority then? The church was the highest authority. Anybody who made a small mistake was condemned by the church. If it was a religious mistake, it was any political mistake or anything, it always came under the purview of the church. So the church, the authority of the church was vested in the Pope, the bishops, the clergy, the priests. They were the ones who were exerting their authority, the religious authority over the people. So if somebody was blamed for theft, they would be punished by the church so strictly, because the church thought that this body should be punished to save the soul. Ultimately, the soul after the death should reach the heaven. So to make that happen after his death, today to punish his body is okay. So he would be whipped, or he would be sent to the jail, where strict measures were taken, so that after the punishment gets over, his soul will be clean. So that was the kind of strict authority the church was wielding then. That's why the Protestantism, that's why questioning happened. That is why resistance happened in the form of Martin Luther, who resisted all this authority of the Catholic Church. Now, this girl, so I'm telling you, this was the kind of life people were leading. And then little farmers, small farmers, their lives were horrible, because they were the ones who toiled very hard day in and day out, and by the time the harvest was ready, they had to pay a lot of taxes and also give away more 70% of what they were they could produce to the landlords as part of rent. So landlord was becoming fatter and fatter in terms of wealth. The poor peasant was becoming thinner and thinner, because he was paying a lot of taxes and rent to the landlords. And the landlord was in nexus with the king. Okay, landlord was enjoying wonderful relationship with the king, because he was giving a lot of money to the king. He was getting a lot of money from the the king was getting a lot of money from the landlords. So naturally, the relationship between the king and the landlords would be very secretive, and very secret kind of nexus would run between the landlords and the king. So the ultimate sufferer in this entire picture was the farmer, the peasant. So this girl, Joan, comes from that background. So she is also questioning the political authority. See, she is raising questions. She wants all this to come to an end. She wants the feudalism, the system of feudalism, to come to a grinding halt. And she was also saying that French is the French people were under the domination of the English, and the English have taken over many provinces of French kingdom. So French provinces should be given back to the French. France is for French. England is for the English. That's her statement. What did she say? French and English, they are two different people. They are two different nationalities. So French people should have their France. English people should have their England. England should not come into France. Okay? England should not trouble the French people. They should be separated. French, France. English, England. That's the separation she wanted. So by constantly using this dialogue, like France for French, France for French, and England for English, England for English. By constantly using this term as a slogan, she was campaigning using this slogan. She had already sown the seeds of nationalism, isn't it? Do you understand now how you can see her as a nationalist? Can you now understand why she is called a nationalist? Because she said France is for the French people, England is for the English people. So when she was constantly using this slogan, campaigning this slogan, she was sowing the seeds of the spirit of nationalism. So the idea of nationalism has been, do you understand that this has been brought by Shaw through this drama? Yes. Okay. So now let us go to the text as such. Now you have got the background. You understood the situation, the political situation, the economical situation, and the religious situation, which was there during the 1400s, the first half of 1400s. As we see, why did George Bernard Shaw write this play in 1920? While 400 years have passed by, and in 1920 he writes this book to tell the truth to the world. See, the world always is going by the facts and not by the truth. So facts can be distorted. Facts can be redesigned. But truth cannot be touched. Truth is truth. It remains the truth forever. So he is trying to show the truth to the people, that this was what the conditions were during the 14th century, 15th century. So he is trying to not revisit the history, but he is trying to show us all the truth, what went wrong. But poor girl, Joan, she got sandwiched between two huge systems. One, political system. The other, religious system. See, a small girl like her, without any background, without any political background, if she is questioning the authority, if she is resisting and protesting, naturally she will be crushed between the two forces. Poor girl Joan got crushed under these two forces. Each force was trying to crush her because they were afraid of their own authority. Are you able to get this point? Selfish. Every system is selfish. Why? The authority remains powerful. The system remains powerful as long as it is not questioned. Okay? Once you start questioning, the pillars start crumbling. So your power structure will start shaking. If the power structure collapses, you aren't there to enjoy the power. So ultimately, what is the motive? You should enjoy the power. If you have to enjoy the power, remove the question and remove the person who is raising the question. If you remove the question and the questioner, your structure will remain intact. Otherwise, it will collapse. So the church was worried. The political system was worried because she was raising questions. So this is the truth. This has been happening all over the histories across the planet. Anybody questioned the authority, he was put to death because the truth should not come out. Even in this case, the truth should be buried. It should not come out. The power structures should remain intact. They should not be shaken. So kill her. So it is a selfish motive of the authorities, both authorities. Poor girl, she became a scapegoat. Otherwise, she is innocent. Okay? So now we have understood that in those days, France was being colonized by the English, and the English masters, English kings were enjoying under the feudalism, where feudalism was prevalent in England and in France. The feudal lords of France now are diverting their funds to the English kings because of the colonialism. And both the feudal lords and the king, the power centers in England, they were enjoying secret nexus. Everybody enjoys this kind of secret nexus. Nothing comes out. Okay? So this girl is very worried that the peasants are struggling. They are becoming poorer and poorer under this feudal system. And the other point is she is worried that France is being taken over by the English. If this continues, French will become a colony. It will never be an independent country. So she wants French to be enjoying only the land, the soil of France. And she wanted the English people to go away from France. At that age, 17 years, she was so strong to think of the world. She was not like other girls of her age who would dream of beautiful dresses, who would dream of, she herself tells this, I am not saying, she herself tells this, that I am not like any other girl of my age who would dream of her husband who would come on a horse and pick her up and take her to his home where she would have kids and thereafter a wonderful life. I am not for that. I want France to be delivered free from the clutches of England. So she wants to fight. How can she deliver France free? She has to get into the battleground. She has to fight. She cannot, she can, indirectly, even if she is telling people, it's not working. So directly she wants to take action. How? By getting into the war zone, by taking the sword, going on the horseback and fighting against the English people and killing the soldiers, English soldiers, and thereby freeing the country. That's her motive. That's her idea. Can a girl of 17 years think on these lines to get into the war zone and fight? No. That's the greatness of Joan. Her name is Joan of Arc. So for that she needs permission. Whose permission? The king's permission. To meet the king, you need to take an appointment. For that appointment, she goes to one captain. So scene 1. Now, until now, I think it is all fine. I hope it is all going well until now. Open up and tell me if it is going well. Shailaja, is it okay?
Fine with it, ma'am. Nicely you're explaining it. It is
So
going
no
well.
problem. Meher Unnisa, is it okay? Salomi,
Ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Shyam Sundar,
Yes, madam. Yes, ma'am.
okay. Okay. Nazneen,
Yes, ma'am.
Shailaja,
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
yeah. Okay, fine. Now we will enter.
Yes, ma'am. Now, okay.
Okay, good. Scene 1. Scene 1. As we see, that girl is dressed like not like a girl who wears long, flowing, beautiful, embroidered, lacy satins and all that. She is very plain looking girl with sharp, intense eyes. She is very simple to look at, and that she has worn the dress of a soldier. This is very important, my dear students. She wearing the dress of a soldier, that is male attire. She wore the dress of a soldier which is meant for the men, and a girl has worn it. By wearing the dress of a man, she has protested and resisted the cultural structures. Isn't it? Today that is considered as very common. But where are we? In the 14th, 15th centuries, Middle Ages. Life was very difficult. So a girl cannot wear the dress of a man. If she wears, she is questioning the authority. How many authorities is she questioning? The cultural authority, the patriarchal authority, the church authority. These many authorities she is questioning by just wearing one dress. So one dress is making a huge statement. Through her dress, she is making a huge statement. That is why, please remember, this is an important point. Okay? So you might think it is simple. No, it is not simple. It's a huge statement that she has made. It's like the statement of protest, resistance, questioning. And she, when enters the captain's tent, camp, the captain is Robert. Robert. And he is unhappy that particular morning, because for his breakfast, eggs have not been served. And so he calls the steward and he asks him why eggs have not been served. So the steward tells that the hens have stopped laying eggs. This is a very silly answer. The captain says, don't you think that this is a silly answer to tell me that the hens are not laying eggs? How come suddenly all the eggs have become important? How the hens have all become important that they have stopped laying eggs? Then the steward says, I don't know, sir, but there seems to be a connection. A girl who is just 16, 17 has entered the camp and she is asking for permission to see you. And we people have stopped her there at the gates, saying that the captain is too busy with the war preparations against the English, so you cannot be given permission. So she is still standing at the gates. But once the girl has started standing there, the hens have stopped laying eggs. It may sound very funny, but this is the connection. And you don't know the soldiers also have become so soft and gentle in her presence that they are not drinking alcohol. The soldiers are not using blasphemous words. We know how they use wrong words. How they are so aggressive in their nature. Suddenly, the soldiers stopped showing their aggression and they have become very soft and gentle in her presence. There is very peculiar and unique about this girl, sir. She seems to be very simple looking, but she has something about her, some energy about her that we all can feel. Then the captain, Robert, says, okay, send her in. So the girl comes. Now, once she comes, we look at her and see that she is very, very firm. Her chin is held up. The confidence levels that she is exhibiting through her body language, they are extraordinary. And she is, of course, very delicate because of her feminine features and all. But all that delicateness about her is being dominated by her firmness of approach. So what do you want? Captain asks her. I have no time. Please tell within 1 minute. She says, good morning, Robert. And the captain is so angry because he is the captain and she is calling him by his name. See, you have to observe all this. Okay, are you observing? She is calling him by his name. Good morning, Robert, she tells. So he says, how can you call me by my name? I'm the captain. So she says, you may be the captain, but your name is Robert. Am I wrong? No. But, okay, the captain dismisses that idea and then says, now why have you come here? She says, I want to see the king. Now, the king is Charles VII, okay? The king has not been officially coronated. You have to, it means to say that officially he didn't pass through the ceremony coronation, which is, but he is the candidate for becoming the king. So that person who is designated to be the king but yet not officially coronated is called the Dauphin. Okay, Dauphin. So the Dauphin is the one who has been designated to become the king but not yet through the official coronation. So he is in between. So she wants to meet the Dauphin. Later, this Dauphin, after the coronation, he becomes the king. So his name then is Charles VII. It is there in the history, Charles VII. So I want to meet the Dauphin, she says. Why do you want to meet the Dauphin? Because I need permission from him to go and fight in the battlefield. She wants to release the province called Orleans. Orleans is a province. Province is a state. You can call it as a district or a jilla or anything. So that is now under the English. She wants to go first, fight in the battlefield, release Orleans, give Orleans back to French people, and then go to another province, fight there, release the other province, give it back to the French people. So she is like now so thoroughly filled with that spirit of nationalism which is overflowing, and then she wants to go from one province to the other, releasing each of it from the chains of the English. So a Dauphin should give her permission. The captain is shocked to listen from her. See, we are all like big people, captains, commandos, All of us are failing here. Using our machinery, using our soldiers, we are all losing our battles to the English people. You come here, a 17-year-old girl, and you are asking for permission to fight against the English. Is it a joke? Do you think we are all useless here? She says, yes. Yes. You are all only trying to, release the smaller regions without being overwhelmed by the spirit of nationalism. You are not fighting for France. You are fighting for small places. You should keep in your heart that you should be burning with the spirit of nationalism, that the entire country, France, should be liberated. You are not thinking on those lines. She is telling the captain, do you see this sounds like, big thing for a captain. A captain can punish her when she is talking like this. See, if I go to the commander-in-chief now and tell him, see, you are not working properly, how would it sound? I will be taken as a mad girl or a mad woman, sorry, not girl, mad woman. Definitely mad. I am out of my senses. Exactly. People started talking about her, that she has gone out of her senses, that she is mad. She is looked upon as a person who is passionate and raging with the spirit of war. She is overwhelmed by the spirit of war. That's what the captain, Robert, sees in her. But something about her is troubling him, that she is, the aura, the positive energy that she is sending through her body language, through her, spirit, or through her talk. All this is so overwhelming that even the captain, such a strong captain, could not say no to her. She seems like, though it sounds like madness, but there is something about her. There is something about her that you can't say no to her. So he says, okay, I will give you permission to see the dauphin. You can go and meet him. So she jumps in joy. And she says, thank you so much, Robert. May God bless you. A young girl, see, if a 5-year-old girl comes to me and says, you have given me a chocolate, thank you, may God bless you. How silly, how funny it would be when a 5-year-old girl tells me, who is 48, and blesses me. How, it's so difficult for a woman of this age to take that. The same thing happened to Captain. She's calling me by my name, and she is showing overzealousness, over-enthusiasm, and then also she is blessing me. But I can't say no to this girl. She has something special about her. There is something about this girl. As this girl leaves the camp, all the hens start laying eggs like crazy. Dozens and dozens of eggs are now being laid by the hens once the permission is given to the girl, Joan. This is the first miracle that she performs. This is the first miracle that she performs. Have you got this? Have you understood this? See, you may not really get all this through your notes. That's why I'm focusing more on what is not given in your notes, okay? So that you will understand properly, one step after the other. So then when the steward comes running, Captain, miracle, the eggs are coming in dozens and dozens. Then the captain sees, yes, I see. She is an angel. something strange about her. I can see that. So that kind of positive energy that she's carrying with her is so conspicuous, so openly felt, that even the animals and creatures and human beings, everybody is able to undergo that. A phenomenal kind of a feeling. Even the hens have, like, no, not just the human beings, but even the hens have faced it. Okay, so that's the first miracle. Then we will go to the dolphin's coat. Now, the dolphin is a kind of you expect. How do you expect the king to be? The would-be king. You when you imagine he should be a wonderful personality. Not just the physical personality, but the inner personality and the kind of motivation and the inspiration that he is supposed to be sending through his acts, through his action. But nothing is coming from the king, the dolphin. So he is like a joker. He is a coward. He doesn't have any characteristic features that a king should be presumably having and exhibiting, like the sense of courage and bravery and determination and leadership qualities. Whatever qualities that we look up to from a leader are totally absent in the dolphin. And above all this, he is a person who wants luxurious life. Today the coffers in the king's court are empty. There is no money in the king's court because all the money is going to wage the wars, battles against the English. So all the money is gone. So what should the king do? He should devise some plans to raise money. But he is so worried that there is no money to buy good dresses. He wants, tomorrow when at the time of my coronation, I don't have a proper dress, royal dress. How can I wear that old shabby clothes? So let me take some money, borrow some money from the feudal lords. This is the worst condition, you see. You have already understood that the feudal lords are very rich. And they always have a kind of a liaison with the king, so that their power continues to be there. So now this king, he is borrowing money from the landlords. For what? For buying tell me, for what is he borrowing money?
Buying dress.
Dresses for his coronation.
Yes.
And can you expect this fellow to become the king of the country and lead the country towards victory?
No, ma'am.
No. So see, now you see how people are. So can you believe that this was the condition? Is it true story? This is the true story. This is the truth. Okay? And then he borrows money, and so if I borrow money from my student, imagine Sharda is borrowing money from Radhika, Madgula. How will I behave with Radhika? Oh, Radhika, please, Radhika, I will give money tomorrow, please, I don't have enough today. See, a teacher is behaving in a very, strange manner, as if, the kind of the relationship between a borrower and the giver is like always like this. So if I am talking to Radhika in a very soft, gentle voice, please, though I am your teacher, I have borrowed money from you, please don't curse me, don't scold me. Don't call me in front of other students. Don't put the mic on and ask for my money. This is how I will talk. Isn't it? Yes. Same way the king is behaving. Same way the dauphin is behaving with his feudal lords and the other members, and they all look down upon him as a joker. Okay, look down upon him as a joker and as a unfit person to become the king. And the captains are all working so hard in the battlefield, and this king, the would-be king Dauphin, he wants to happily lie down on his bed to escape from the wrath of the battlefield. He doesn't want to see blood. He doesn't want to fight. He is a coward. He is not a warrior. He doesn't have any whatever characteristic feature that a king should have. He doesn't have any. Totally absent. And then somebody gets the message that the captain is sending a girl. She wants to see the dauphin. The messenger comes. In that court, dauphin is there, and there is a bishop. Okay, there is a bishop. And the other ministers, other commanders, all of them are sitting. And so the dauphin says, "Hey, let us. I heard from the captain that she is an angel. That is what Robert writes in his message. She is an angel. So please see her." So that message I have seen. The captain Robert calls her an angel. Let us put her to test. So I will behave. Not like a king. I will behave like a minister and let the minister sit on the throne. Somebody called Bluebeard, one of the officers there, he is now being presented to Joan as the dauphin. Let us test her, whether she is an angel or not. So Joan walks in. Okay, she walks in. Directly she goes to Bluebeard, who is being presented as the dauphin, and says, "Why are you sitting here? Bluebeard, here dauphin is supposed to sit." She doesn't know him, she hasn't seen him. This test also she doesn't know, but she cleared it off. And she goes to the dauphin, who is sitting in the third row or somewhere, and tells, "Why are you sitting there? Come on, we should now go into the battlefield. You should be ready." And the dauphin is so happy, not because she is an angel, but because somebody has looked at me and has recognized me as the king. Because nobody recognizes him as the king. If he walks down the road, he wouldn't even be given a second glance. Nobody ever, because that's the kind of physical and otherwise personality he exhibits. Nobody even looks at him a second time. But she has recognized me. So look at that. Nobody recognizes me as the king, as a future king. This girl has recognized. You see, you have to learn from her. So that test also she has passed. And then she goes to the bishop and then bows down to him and takes blessings from him. And then she puts forth the idea that she wants to fight for the country. She says, "Please give me permission. I will go to Orleans. Orleans is the province which has been taken over by the English. Okay, so give me permission. I will go and release the province Orleans." Everybody laughs. Orleans is being, the toughest of the captain, the tough master called Junai is deployed there from the side of France. He himself has become helpless. You are a small girl. You want to go there and fight? She says, because Junai is not filled with the spirit of nationalism. I will go and fill his spirit with nationalism and I will help him. What? You know, are you joking? He is a tough nut. He is a hardcore officer, and you will go help him? Look at, mind your words, my dear. You cannot use such words like I will go help him, I will go fill him with the spirit of nationalism, I will go release Orleans and free the country. What kind of language are you using, my dear girl? Be cautious with your language. So she says, no. I am hell bent on going there. Give me a horse, give me a sword. Then the bishop says, my dear girl, do you know what kind of trouble you are heading towards? You want to wear the dress of a soldier that is going against the church, and you want to go fight in the battlefield like a man that's again going against the church. You want to take the sword into your hands, which is so unwomanly. It is again the questioning of the authority of the church. What are you up to, my dear girl? You will only see the wrath of the God. God will punish you. You shouldn't be doing all this. Then she says, how can you say that, my dear bishop? I have great respect for you, but I have got message from the God himself. God will not punish me because God has asked me to go and fight. God, how? How is that possible? Do you think God will talk to you? Did God come to you personally and tell you, yes, God told me. God, I have heard the voices of the God. He tells everything through the voices. You know, if you closely open your senses, you will be able to listen. And come on, she is telling the bishop. She is telling the bishop, the highest authority, to open up the senses and listen to the voices of God. Don't you think this is the ultimate thing? She is treating everybody on the same lines. The captain, the king, the bishop, everybody is equal to her. She says, I have to only bow down to the king of the kings, the God. I am not listening, I am not bowing down to the other agents here. I am only answering the king of the kings. Who is the king of the kings? The God there. Why should I listen to the agents here? That's the exact point of Protestantism. This is where she is protesting. This is where she has sown the seeds of Protestantism. Are you able to see the ideas here? All the ideas are coming to fruition here. All the spirit of nationalism has almost come, treating everybody equally, and then telling that I will only listen to the God and not to the agents. That exactly is Protestantism. So the bishop is again very angry. You know, they can't be questioned. The church cannot be questioned. The authority of the church cannot be questioned. If she is set free, things will all go wrong. Everybody has his or her own point there. Then the king says, yes, because you have recognized me, I will give you permission. Now you can go into the battlefield and, as you said, help the captain Dunois in the Orleans. Go and then fight. I'm giving you the permission. So she thanks the Dauphin. She said, thank you, Dauphin. I will come back with good news. And then she turns to the bishop and also seeks his blessings. Then this scene comes to an end. Now let us go to the next scene. The next scene is Orleans. Why is she going to Orleans? She is going there to release Orleans from the English. She is going there to help the captain there. Who is the captain? Dunois. And how is Dunois known as? Very tough, very powerful. And she is going to help the powerful commander there. So we will see Dunois first, later Joan. And then Dunois is very worried here because the river has to be crossed. There is a river and the river has to be crossed to reach the other side to fight the English. The French people are at a disadvantage because the river is uphill here, whereas for the English from their side it is downhill. It means that for them it is easy to come without even waiting for the wind to be
on their side. If the boats have to reach this side of France, they can come anytime because the wind is all the time on their side, being the uphill, on the uphill. But for France, it is the downhill. So it means that the boat has to go up against the current of the water. So it is naturally very disadvantageous. So now Junoi is only praying for the wind, the west wind, to give its force so that all the boats can move towards the English to fight against them. So he has been praying hard. And he also gets a message that there is a girl coming to join him. He is like surprised. Huh? The girl coming to join me? Oh my God. So then the other soldiers tell him, it seems that she is like an angel, and wherever there she is, her presence is going to change the entire forces of nature. Even animals and birds and trees are listening to her, not just the human beings. So suddenly, as he turns, the saint, sorry, Joan is there on the horse. She is mounted on a horse and with a sword, and she's calling out, Junoi, come, let us go. She doesn't even introduce herself. So she just says, come on, let us go. Then he understands that this is the girl who I got the message about. He says, no, the wind is not the force of the wind is not enough for us to go. Oh, you're waiting for the west wind. Come on, let's all get inside the boats. Let's go. Suddenly there is a change in the environment. The wind has become so forceful that the boat started zooming fast. This is another miracle you can see. See, one after the other, she has been performing miracles without her knowledge. Whatever she thinks of, it is happening. Whatever she wants is happening. And all the elements of nature are listening to her. It means they are joining her to revive the spirit of nationalism. The elements of nature also seem to be joining her in her action. Now Junoi is like shocked. I have been praying for this for a very long time and nothing has moved. When she had entered, the entire environment has changed. Look at the force of the wind here. It looks as if, some machines are sending the boats up. They are racing. That's all. This is the third scene. Now we will go to next scene where indirectly we come to know that Orleans has been reclaimed by the French. Look at this. Orleans has been reclaimed by the French. It means with the presence of John, even the toughest commander like Junoi, who couldn't help his soldiers, today John could do it. John could do it and release Orleans from the clutches of the English. And what did she do after that? After the biggest activity, she came back to the court of the Dauphin and she said, now you will become the king. The god had told me that once Orleans has been released, you please coronate the Dauphin and make him the king of France. Come, let's go to the Cathedral of Reims. The cathedral is waiting for you in that church. We will have the coronation ceremony. So it looks as if she is breaking all the laws. Who has to coronate? The bishop has to coronate. Who has to decide? The church has to decide. But she seems to be breaking all the laws one after the other. And the Dauphin is so happy that he can now become the king. He wants to enjoy the chair. He wants to enjoy the luxury and the power that the chair brings it to him. But he doesn't want to also be responsible enough, fit enough for the chair. He is not doing all that. He is just enjoying the chair. So he becomes the king. Who makes him the king? The girl makes him the king. Why did the king listen to her by breaking the rule? Because he wants to be the king and enjoy all the luxuries. He didn't listen to the bishop and the church. Now the church is so angry with this girl. Okay. Now let us. So France, here in France, the church is very angry with this girl because she has broken many rules. Number one, she wore the dress of a man. Number two, she behaved like a woman. She behaved like a man by mounting the horse and by carrying the sword and by fighting in the war. Number three, she has broken the law of the church by making the dauphin the king, not through the church, but by, autonomous agency. That is the girl. The girl is now an autonomous agency. She has cut the king from the church. So this is a huge threat to the church. If one little girl is doing this, tomorrow everybody does that. The church has to retain its power. The church has to retain its authority. Political authority, religious authority, all these authorities are vested in the church. And so with the one act of this girl, all the pillars are now shaking. If somebody else is going to repeat this, tomorrow there is no political authority, religious authority, cultural authority that the church enjoys. So that is a huge threat to the church. That's an important point. Next, we will go to England. Until now, is it okay? Clear?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It is clear.
You have to think everybody here is acting very selfishly, except for this girl.
Yes, ma'am.
The king is selfish, Dauphin is selfish, the church is also taking it as a threat. You see, all this is happening. Okay? Now, Salome, please switch it off. Switch the mic off. Then we will now go to England. What is happening in England? England is now worried. If Orleans can be taken by the French, such a tough place where we have planted our authority, if that has been taken off from us, tomorrow it will happen that other provinces also slowly will move away from us back into the hands of the French people. Our authority, our power, our feudalism, our colonialism is under question. Who is the problem maker? There is a girl, just 17 years old, who had jumped into the battle at Orleans, and she fought like a devil. She fought like a devil, like with such great force. An English arrow pierced into her throat, but she continued fighting with that arrow stuck in her throat without even giving a second thought to it. And after the war was over, only then she removed the arrow from her throat. She didn't even mind that as a painful tool or a weapon that got stuck in her throat. She didn't even mind that. Can any human being behave like this? Definitely she is not an angel. She is a devil. See how the people are subverting her ideas. Okay, how they are twisting her ideas. No human being will ever be able to fight like her. And if this continues, our authority, our colonial authority, our feudal authority will be at stake. We should stop this. We should stop this. Back in France, church wants it to be stopped. In England, they want her to be stopped because their colonial authority will not be continuing with this girl. This is what is happening now. Next. Now she says, Joan says, Junai, come, let us go and release another province. Then Junai says, Joan, see, don't be, I see you as, possessed by the passion for war, which is not good. Then she says, no, God has asked me to release France. Okay, I can understand. See, once in Orleans, we have succeeded. Tomorrow, we may not have the same force. We may not have the favorable conditions. You may be caught. And when you are caught and captured, nobody will come to your rescue. If you are caught by the English, I am sure the king will not come to your rescue. I am sure the church will not come to your rescue. You will be killed by the English. Do not do this. Wait for some time. So when Junai had given her this, she didn't listen to him. She said, no, I am not going to rest until France is going to be delivered free. If you are not coming, I will go all by myself. By then, you know what happened? England is waiting for an opportunity to capture her alive. Now, why they want to capture her? Because she seems to be a threat to the political system. And here in France, the church wants her to be captured by the English because they see her as a threat to the religious system. Can you now see how slowly she is? Simple girl, a plain girl. She is coming between two huge machineries. One political, the other religious. Now you see how they are closing in on her, slowly to crush her. Are you able to see this? Can you tell yes or no?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, very clearly is this happening to her? They don't want her because she's a threat. Can you see simple girl? A simple girl is a threat to two huge machines, two huge systems. So what the English did is they bribed some people and they caught her alive. In the next war, they got her, they captured her, and then they put her in the jail. English people put her in the jail. Now everybody is talking about how she is defying the church and how she is questioning the authority of the church. See, when Orleans was relieved and when she reclaimed the territory, nobody talked about her goodness. Everybody is focusing on how she is going against the authority. Now, anyone, whoever comes forward to save her will again be condemned by the church. You are talking on her side, so you are siding her. It means indirectly you are questioning the authority. So nobody wants to come forward to support this girl, including the Dauphin. Now the Dauphin is the king. He is Charles VII. He doesn't want to come to support her because he wants his seat to be intact. Everybody is selfish. Everybody is selfish. So he didn't want to help her. Now she is in the court. She is sent to the court. This is an important scene, my dear students. This is called the trial. court scene. Which court is she in? Not the secular court, but the religious court. Can you believe this? She is sent to the religious court because she has, observed heresy, blasphemy. These are all big words. Blasphemy and heresy are big words for the church. Anybody who is going against the church, they are supposed to be blasphemous and heretics. Like, for example, if somebody is practicing witchcraft, black magic, they are heretics. But this girl is not doing that, but she has been branded by the church as a heretic. What are the serious charges against her? Tell me. Wearing the dress of a soldier. Is that a serious charge? Do you think this is causing so much of damage to the fabric of the religion? No, but this is the serious charge. And next serious charge is that she always claims to be listening to the voices of God, but church will never believe in her words because God never talks to anybody personally. God only talks through the church. So this is another reason why she is branded as going against the church. So now the questions by the church. She is standing in the bone. No. Why did you wear the dress of a soldier? She says, can you expect me to be wearing a long, free flowing gown and be mounting on the horseback and then fighting? No, I cannot fight with the girl's dress. So I wore the dress of the man, which is very comfortable for me to mount the horse and to also fight. The girl's dress is not comfortable. Next, why are you saying that you are doing all this in the name of God? God will not talk to anybody personally. Then she says, yes, I always keep my senses open. God will talk to me through the bells. God will talk to me through the flowers. God will talk to me through different medium. Oh, no. All this is blasphemous. God will not talk through different mediums. The only medium through which God is talking is church. You always say, I am listening to the God, where the flowers talk to me, the plants talk to me, the water talks to me. This is bad. This is devilish. You are on the side of the devil, not on the side of God. You are under the influence of the devil. Come out of that. She says, no. How can I come out of that? I know I am enjoying the experiences of God. This is something very, very important. Okay? I am experiencing the God through many ideas that God is trying to tell us. Not only the church. That is the biggest problem now. My dear girl, we should save your soul by punishing your body. Because your body is under the influence of the devil. So what is the punishment? You should be burned so that your soul can be saved and then sent to the heaven. Our ultimate idea is to save the souls. So you will be burnt for your blasphemy. Then she says, no, I want to live. I want to enjoy the experience of God. I want to experience every moment. Then they say, okay, agree to this point that you were under the influence of the devil. Then we will lessen the punishment. We will not burn you. See, a 17-year-old girl, if she say, we will burn you, we will tie you to a stake, and then we will put you to fire. Any human being would be really, you can't even imagine the torture. By then already for so many days they have tortured her. physically, emotionally, psychologically, they have tortured her. They didn't give her proper food. They didn't give her any proper things. She was tortured. And again, finally, they say, now you have to agree that you are under the influence of devil. Otherwise, we will burn you. Like any other girl, she said, no, I want to live. Then they bring a paper and sign on this. So she signs. What does that paper read? She has agreed to the point that she was under the influence of the devil. That is why she was listening to the voices. She has agreed that she has listened to the voices of the devil and not the voices of God. For this, because we have to save her, we were putting her into the jail until she lives. It may be 70 years, it may be 80 years. Until then, she will be in the jail. And in the jail, she will not even be allowed to see the single ray of the sun. Constantly, she will be in the darkness. She has to introspect herself. She has to question herself how she had gone against the God. As long as she lives, only a small hole through which food will be sent to her. Do you think this is so painful? She is just 17, and as long as she lives, maybe 50, 60, 70 years later, she has to constantly be in a small hole, devoid of light, devoid of energy, devoid of the elements of nature, devoid of everything. So she's shocked to listen to this. She's shocked. She says, how can you deny me the elements of nature? God talks to me through the sun rays. He has created the sun for me to enjoy its energy, to enjoy its force, to enjoy its beauty. God has created the beautiful flowers and the plants and everything for me to enjoy. And you are denying me all that? You are depriving me of all the beauty of the world that God has created for me to enjoy and experience the God's presence? No, I don't want this punishment. I will go back to what I am. And she tears that paper down and then tells, why should I now be denied of all this? I don't want to perish in the dark chambers. Better I be burnt. Better I be burnt rather than perish in the dark chambers and be denied the beauty and experience of the Lord. And so again they say, see, this is the doing of the devil. The devil has caught her so hard that she is not able to accept God. Look at that. Look at the painful ideas that the whole world is thrusting on this girl. The English people don't want her to live. The church doesn't want her to live. She is crushed between the two forces. And so she wants to be burnt rather than perish in the dark regions. She said, take me and burn me. I am ready to go to the Lord now. And so she is taken to the square, the town square, where the pyre is ready, the firewood is ready. She is tied to that pole, and then when the minute at that point of time when the fire is going to be engulfing her, she cries out to one of them, please give me 2 sticks. So one soldier who is there overseeing this entire procedure of burning, he throws 2 sticks at her. So she holds the 2 sticks like a cross, and she brings that cross to her heart, and she dies. Okay? And she dies. Now, the executioner, whoever has set fire to this, should see to it that every part of her body is burnt and only the ashes remain, because no, her body has to be burnt fully to save her soul. The executioner tries so hard to burn her heart, but her heart doesn't burn. Her spirit doesn't burn. He puts fire to the heart again and again and again, but the heart doesn't burn. So he comes to tell this news to the bishop and to the captain of the England, Warwick. His name is Warwick. He tells her, sir, she asked for the 2 sticks, and a soldier threw 2 sticks at her, which she combined them and made into a cross. And she held it to her heart and died. But I am sorry, I cannot kill her heart. Her heart is still throbbing. Then Warwick, he collapses. He says, no devil will ask for the cross. No devil will ask for the cross. She is really an angel. After her death, after her burning, everybody realizes that yes, she is really an angel. She is the agent of the God. She is not the agent of the devil. Otherwise, why would she ask for the cross? No devil will do that. But by then, it's already late. Then that scene ends. Later, 40 years later, you know what happened? The church has revived the case and rehabilitated her, read her story thoroughly, and found out that she was not the devil, but she was the angel, and she had performed many miracles. So she has to be beatified and then canonized as the saint. 400 years later, in 1920, she has been canonized as the saint. See how ironical it is for the church to establish a fact that she is not a devil, but an angel. And for 400 years, the church took its time. And finally, in 1920, the church had canonized her and called her a saint and not a devil. So after that, you know, we have an epilogue, very important one. So after her death, 40, some 15, 20 years later, she comes back in the dreams of all the important people that she had met during her lifetime, like the dauphin. So the dauphin is now the king. He is sleeping in his chambers. So now she goes to the dauphin in her dreams and asks, see, now I am a saint. Will you please, when I come back into your life, will you accept me as the saint? And she said, no, please don't come into my life. As such, I'm happy that my coronation was not done by a devil, but now today I am happy that my coronation has been done by a saint. At least that branding I am missing. That branding of being coronated by the devil will be removed, and people will say that Charles has been coronated by a saint. I am happy at that, but please don't come back. She goes to everybody, the bishop. The bishop says, no, I can't take you. She goes to Junai. Junai says, no, we are not ready for you. And suddenly there is a soldier walking Um, and then she goes to him and asks him, "Who are you?" He says, "See, for all the misdeeds I have done when I was alive, I am deputed in the hell. But just for one day, I am released to go and enjoy the heaven, because they say I have given 2 sticks to a dying girl. I don't remember, but I just threw 2 sticks at her when she was asking for it. But for that reason, they say I can enjoy heaven for one day. Oh, that is why I am outside now. Oh, now it is time for me to go back to hell." So he goes back to hell. And she goes to everybody and says, "Will you allow me back? Because now I am a saint. I am a saint. I am a saint." They say, "No, no, 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 no. We don't want. We don't want. We don't want. We don't want." Everybody runs away from her. And then she says, "See, nobody is ready to accept the saints." This is the kind of irony. This is the kind of life. Everybody wants to run away from the truth. Everybody wants to hang over to the facts, but not to the truth. And everybody is so selfish. 400 years ago, they were selfish. 400 years later, even after my declaration of being a saint, they are still selfish. The world will never change. So, the world will never change. That's the end of Saint John. Did you enjoy?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. It's a wonderful text, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
You can understand the various politics behind this, and how a little girl has been crushed under 2 huge machines called politics and religion, and how people are so selfish, and how different ideas have been discussed by George Bernard Shaw, and how people are still not ready to accept the truth. To show the truth, to tell the truth, he had written this 100 years ago. And even after 100 years, today, the world is the same. It hasn't changed a bit. So with this, we have very clearly understood St. John. And whatever question that comes in St. John, I am sure whoever has listened to it will be able to answer. So with that, enjoy your Deepavali. I'll come back on Sunday.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Wish you the same. Wish you the same.
Thank you, ma'am. And same to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Happy Diwali,
Bye, bye,
ma'am.
bye, bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Same to you. Happy Diwali.